everybody, and welcome to How Transportation Infrastructure Catalyzes Community-Led Development. We're going to have a wonderful conversation with three of my fabulous team members looking at Destination Crenshaw. So let me introduce myself and the panelists. My name is Gabrielle Bullock. I'm a principal and director of global diversity for Perkins & Well and the managing principal for Destination Crenshaw. I have with me Jason Foster, who is president and chief operating officer of Destination Crenshaw. Jason is responsible for the administration and operations of the nonprofit, construction of the project's parks, open space, and infrastructure. Prior to joining Destination Crenshaw, Jason served as the Director of Strategic Partnerships at River LA, the organization charged with improving and revitalizing communities adjacent to the 51-mile stretch of the LA River. Jason holds a Bachelor's of Business Administration and Finance from Howard University and an MBA from the Metropolitan College of New York. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you, Gabrielle. It's a pleasure.
Next up, Dr. Joy Simmons. Joy is the Senior Art and Exhibit Design Advisor for Destination Crenshaw. Joy is an avid African-American art collector and advocate who has deeply influenced the cultural landscape, especially in her hometown of Los Angeles. She has led many art and cultural organizations, too many to name right here. Joy is, her alma mater is Stanford University. She's been on the board of trustees of Stanford. She's a graduate of Crenshaw High School, right along our corridor. And Joy works at Destination Crenshaw to bring together her love for culture and community. Welcome, Joy.
Thank you.
And last but not least, my colleague, Kenneth Luker, who is a design principal in our North Carolina practice. Kenneth is the design principal for Destination Crenshaw. He is an award-winning designer, mentor, and thought leader in applying cultural awareness to design programming. Kenneth is active at the NC State College of Design, where he serves on the Design Life Board of Directors. Kenneth received a master's at the Harvard University Graduate School of Design and a Bachelor's of Environmental Design from Texas A&M University. Hello, Kenneth in North Carolina. Welcome.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, we only have 45 minutes, so now we have 40 minutes, so we're going to get into this. Just to give you a background about Destination Crenshaw, it was precipitated by the rail extension in the community of South Los Angeles Crenshaw District, and responded with a transformative public arts and cultural development. And it will be a cultural and art experience of 1.3 miles along Crenshaw Boulevard, a major commercial corridor. It is a multidisciplinary project. It includes architecture, landscape, exhibit design, and art. Some of the key goals of this project were placekeeping, and that's key, community building, longevity, and having a positive impact on the community. So thank you all, and we're going to get started with some questions. So this is for all of you. So this project is an example of the drivers and confluence of transit, culture, and neighborhoods. What in your view was the vision for the project relative to these three drivers? And I'm going to start with you, Jason.
Great. Thank you, Gabrielle. I think, for me, the drivers of this project was how do we get community participating in the infrastructure changes that are happening in their own community. A lot of times, especially in Black communities, change is sort of seen as a fearful thing. And people are wary of different changes, whether they be developments or different projects that are happening. And Destination Crenshaw really tried to turn that fear into an opportunity with community members, allowing them to participate in conversations around what are their hopes and dreams for their community beyond the train. And we found that They really wanted to have a community that acknowledged them, that celebrated their history, their present and their future, and really celebrated who they were today. And I think that equitable decision to have the community members be a part of the project from the very beginning is really something that drives Destination Crenshaw even today.
That's wonderful. I just want to make a note. So this rail extension is at grade. So it's not below grade, it's not elevated, it is at grade. I think that's an important distinction. So Kenneth, from your perspective, can you address that, the vision?
Yeah, Black LA is, it's a community of an amazing accomplishments and cultural influence that goes well beyond the city, well beyond the U.S. It actually has had a profound influence on the entire world. And, as the design team, our vision was to try and take that story and tell it in a fresh way using architecture and landscape architecture, public art, and exhibits. And so using all of that to, in some ways, leverage the story as a cultural asset, and then by doing that, create a unique sense of place, a definitive place. That placekeeping that you just mentioned, Gabrielle, that was very, very important, because if establishing that unique sense of place, really leveraging that cultural asset to the benefit of the community, that was our first vision. The second one was really to also establish a bulwark against cultural erasure that very often comes with gentrification. And South Central LA right now, as those of you who live there know, there is a significant amount of pressure on the community, particularly the long-term residents. And so we wanted to really exercise the objectives of that placekeeping that you had mentioned a bit ago.
Wonderful. Joy, from an art and exhibit design perspective, what say you about vision?
Well, for me, having grown up in the neighborhood, my high school is a block away from, the boulevard. And it's important for the community to come back and see this neighborhood as vibrant as it was many years ago when I attended Crenshaw High School. For them to participate in that revitalization. Yes, change of a train coming down the middle of Crenshaw was, it was terrifying. Like, what is this going to do? The neighborhood was already starting to dwindle a little bit, and everyone thought this was just going to tear up the community, and it was just going to divide us, and it was just going to go to pot. But to have this vision of, no, we can use this opportunity to revitalize, to energize, and especially using art as a way to end these pocket parks. I think that's the other part of this. It's not only are you going to drive by and you see a mural or whatever, but there's places to land, to sit, to contemplate. There's new trees. All of that is coming to revitalize and re-energize this neighborhood that really has a history, that really is vibrant. And I think that's the part that's going to really spark and energize this community. When they come around the corner and you see a mural, or you come around and you see a sculpture, and you sit up there and you can say, I'm having a cup of coffee at this little park that used to be kind of desolate. I mean, that is going to be what we just don't have in this community and can really bring it back alive. And I think that everyone's very excited.
Indeed. Thank you. Okay, on to the next one. So this public civic project that uses art and culture, right, as a catalyst the goal was to have it be a catalyst for economic security and entrepreneurship. Can you share your thoughts about how this might happen or how you foresee this happening? And I'm going to start in reverse now. I'm going to go to you, Joy.
Well, again, when people see it coming back alive, then they, as part of the gentrification pressure, then people say, no, I'm not going to sell grandmama's house. We're going to stay here and we're going to build on what we have. We own this piece of property now. Let's stay here and let's rejuvenize, expand, whatever. Let's build our businesses here. Why not? We can't put a little small gallery or a coffee shop or whatever. This is the kind of revitalization that this will bring to this neighborhood, because then they can see, what, there is something here. We need to be here. We need to stay here. This is our stake in the ground. And I am just thrilled that people will then, it'll, the economic security of having your own property, of having your own neighborhood, of having things that are vibrant in your neighborhood. That's the thing that's going to really change for me in this community.
Jason?
So like you said earlier, I come from these things with a finance perspective. And I think that, the displacement that a lot of times happens around public infrastructure installations are because of the economic benefits that come from those projects tends to go outside of the community, right? So focusing on art as the driver of this project really speaks to the community residents who really generate the majority of the Black art for the globe, right? Like Crenshaw is the home of the Black art culture and scene. And we want to make sure that we're able to capture the economic benefit and impact in the community so that they can participate and benefit tangibly from this infrastructure. Destination Crenshaw has what we call the reparative framework. So the infrastructure was repairing the community, right? Like it was not livable, walkable. These businesses that were thriving along the corridor, it was actually, they were doing above and beyond what normal businesses had to do in other areas and communities. And Destination Crenshaw is acknowledging that. We're trying to make it easier for these businesses to do their work, make it easier for people to come and experience and just live in a safe and secure environment.
Wonderful. Kenneth, would you like to add anything to that?
Sure. If in cities everywhere, if we look around wherever we travel, the neighborhoods that seem to be most cherished, that are sustaining themselves economically, like Jason just described, and that are really thriving. Those usually are neighborhoods that have a really good story. Having a good story gives a community identity, and that sort of this, by extension, this sense of a shared set of values and purpose. And if you think about the art and the culture that has come from Black LA, that's an amazing story. And if we can bring it back home, right, to the neighborhood of its origin, that can function as a sort of this culture or this cohesive foundation that gives the neighborhood not just a physical relationship or identity, but it gives it a sense of community that's an essential ingredient to economic security and entrepreneurial growth, incentivizing people to really take the chance to invest in their own neighborhood and to stick it out. So that I think is the way that art and culture can really be a catalyst for strengthening the community.
Wonderful. So Jason, this one goes to the money. So typical of many urban development projects in our country, this project was instigated by a rail extension, transportation expansion through a major commercial district, which happens to be in the Black community. What's perhaps atypical is its funding. So it's largely privately funded with some metro and city contribution. Can you talk about the significance of that strategy and how you've been able to achieve it or are achieving it?
Absolutely. I think, what the main goal of Destination Crenshaw was to do, like I said earlier, was to get the community to be leading this effort, to have a point of view that actually resonates with community residents. And that is a big part of, why we decided to go the direction we did with funding. We are very happy that we do have public support, but the private support actually allows us to add the extra, I would say the non-traditional infrastructure improvements that are culturally stamped, right? So we're talking about art, we're talking about entrepreneurs, we're talking about creatives in the Black community. These are not traditional things that kind of go alongside of your public infrastructure projects. And that's really what the private funding is allowing us to do. The philanthropy is kind of reaching a moment where, we had two pandemics. We had one that was a health pandemic. We had another that was a social pandemic. But the thing about the Black community is that we have been here and are going to continue to be here throughout this time. So when the community started thinking 4.5 years ago, who knew that an outdoor open air museum would exactly be what you needed right now? but to create an accessible, equitable space for everyone to be able to participate, that's what you needed to do. So I think it really kind of points to why private funding was so important, and also the public funding.
Mm-hmm. Great. So we're going to go switch to, from the design perspective, Kenneth. We engage the community as design partner very purposefully. Can you expand on that and that notion and the success in its process?
Sure. I kind of want to build on what Jason was saying about really letting this be a community-led effort, because it's really easy for those of us who are architects and landscape architects and urban designers to imagine that we've created something from scratch. But in reality, we discovered when we engaged this project that there was already a highly motivated, very active community that had been working for years to lay the groundwork for what we're doing now. I mean, this has been going on. We simply kind of jumped on their train and just joined the effort, really. Joining that effort, recognizing what has already been accomplished, and then partnering with those who have been active in the community, who have been leading and by example and by effort, making them our partners. That was I think the key to the success of this project, because not only did it make the design stronger because they knew the community better than any of us, but they also, by working with them instead of just working for the community, we work with the community to design this project. Then they become our ambassadors to the broader community for the project. And as anyone who's done public projects know, and our audience know very well, the value of grassroots community support is priceless to the success of a project of this scale. And this is a really large project, stretch, as you mentioned, 1.3 miles, 9 pocket parks, all this public art that's going in on all the streetscape. It's not a drop in the bucket, but it's it's going to infuse itself broadly into the community that is there today. And having the ability to work with the community to tailor each of these pocket parks to the specific needs of the different parts of the community, that's really valuable. And that's I think will be the foundation of the success.
Right. I would agree. And I would think that, I want to make the distinction between community engagement and community as design partner, because this project really does the latter. Yeah. It's not just a perfunctory informing the community, it's really engaging. And so Kenneth, I'm going to push on you just a little bit. Can
Absolutely.
You talk about how much this community was involved in the design from the concept all the way through? Because I think it's critical to the success of this project.
Well, as I mentioned, so much of the work had been done. There'd been at least 2 or 3 years of starting in living rooms, very grassroots, to gain support, and then with the councilman's leadership, building that community group that we began to engage with. The first thing that we did, and the first thing about telling any good story and representing any community through design, is that you have to begin by understanding the journey that community has been on. It's a process that we call remembrance design. And that means that we spent days and days with the group listening to their stories and what their community meant to them and why this project was important. We then moved with that same group towards blue sky thinking and beginning to do design charrettes with them. And then from those charrettes, we were able to glean out several prevailing design themes. And those themes really became the foundation of the objectives of the project, the sort of the tangible objectives. And then we were able to craft the story around that to accomplish those objectives, to tell the community story, and then to imbue the design in a way that the landscape, the plantings, the paving, the art, the architecture, every bit of it is part of telling that story. And it's not the architect, we've just been entrusted with the community story. And it's a great honor to be entrusted with that. But we're really working with the community to tell their story. It's their story we're telling.
So Kenneth, you mean to tell me that the Crenshaw community did not want white, modern, and Arial font?
Surprise, surprise.
Wow, okay. That's awesome.
And Kenneth and the rest of the design team were able to pivot, were we not?
We were.
There we go. There we go. So community design, right?
Community design, absolutely.
So I'm going to go to Joy next with, so from the art, the storytelling, the exhibit design, as senior advisor and leader of the art curation committee and council that we've been working with all these 3 years, can you talk about how the approach and how you see those three components achieving the vision of unapologetically Black stories and celebration and legacy and all the rest?
Well, I think, again, as part of the community, before the curatorial teams were even developed, we were also part of the advisory council in the conversations that Perkins and Will was having with the community. So people have been involved for a long time. We subsetted out those people with the professional expertise of being curators, fine art curators, to be able to start whittling down and corralling the local artists, LA based or LA trained or grew up in LA, to find those artists that have a resonance with this community, to then come up with the group of artists that we have to participate in the project. So we're not talking about just the fine artists, but we do have people who are grand sculptors and people who are, big, if you will. But we also have mid-range, mid-career artists, as well as street artists and, up-and-coming artists, to all participate in this project. But again, I think it was important for the curatorial team, the exhibition team, to be a part of the discussions very early on. And they all live in the neighborhood. So they know this neighborhood. They're part of this community. And all of that worked together to be able to work with Perkins and Will and to work with, the whole concept of, the landscape architecture. We lost a lot of trees when the space shuttle coming from the airport went to the museum. And it really devastated this community and it blighted the look of this community. But with people who really understood what it used to look like and what we wanted to feel like, and how this revitalization is not just placing little art pieces over there, but to have a community, parks and parklets and all of that really made a big difference, I think. And then with the storytelling, having not only the people who grew up here and who lived here talk about what used to be here, but we rallied those historians at UCLA to work with us to be able to flesh out those stories, get the fine details, so that really when people come down this boulevard, they're going to learn so much about how impactful this community is, was, and will be in the future. Not just like the hip hop part of Crenshaw. But,
right.
Well, let's talk about the hip hop part, because I remember early on conversations about what art, what stories, what are we representing. We were specific ultimately that it was not going to be a chronological timeline type of museum, so to speak. Can you speak to, maybe it goes back to the themes, right, that we designed to, Kenneth, but can you and Joy talk about that connection of theme, story, and, what's going to be represented? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I'll get started. I think it's really important that we not tell a chronological story. And the reason is that we're not designing a museum. We're not designing a space where you enter at one spot and you exit at another and there's a finite story. What we're telling is a multifaceted story about a fantastic community that isn't just This isn't a story of just the past. This is a story of past, present, and we anticipate future. And you should be able to step into that story and engage it at any point. So it was important that we tell the story and sort of structure the narratives around thematic lenses like togetherness, about what are the values that hold this community together over time, over the years, or about first, celebrating the accomplishments and the leadership and innovation and politics and everything else that have come from this community. And then the other thematic lenses that allow you to delve into the community and to different ways to begin to understand and then to maybe explore further over time.
And I think one of the artistic things that we had to consider and think about was that how will people interact with Crenshaw Boulevard? They're going to be on the train, so there's zipping past at however fast trains go, and then, or they're going by car, however fast they're sliding down Crenshaw. But there's pedestrian, because that could be a whole thing. But people are walking. There's all these kinds of ways to interact, and with the having art that can be seen on a big scale, having pieces that are then more intimate, where those are placed is really important for the community to engage. We want to be able to have kids walking to school and see a mural and sparks a history about Paul Williams, for example, an architect, an amazing imprint on Los Angeles, or or the Black Panther Party and what happens on the murals. I think there's all kinds of ways for people to come in, weave in. But I think it was important for the curatorial team as well as the community to consider not only the big established artists, but older artists, younger artists. How are people, interacting and engaging in the art world? And with the mural projects and things that are more temporary pieces, that can turn over in a couple of years, 3 to 5 years. Another set of artists can come in and interact with this different wall spaces to interpret Los Angeles and their view at that stage in life. This is a COVID period, but then 5 years from now, we might be doing something entirely different, and we want that represented as well. So,
and that speaks to the longevity of this development, right? This is not one and done.
No.
Jason, this wasn't on the list of questions, but I think it's relevant. So once the project is complete, 2021, 2022, what do you foresee as in your role as Chief Operating Officer and President, how will this be maintained?
I mean, that's a great question, and it kind of points to another public-private partnership. I do think that, Destination Crenshaw, it is our responsibility to program, operate, and maintain the space after it's created to the standard of the project that we're creating. So this is something that we're trying to really break the mold and build a partnership of stakeholders and interested parties that can really drive not only the maintenance and operations, but also the programming. Right? Yeah. Like community engagement talks about doors and windows, make a bunch of doors, make a bunch of windows. How about when you don't have any, right? You can actually advocate the community to be your spokespeople, to be the people when you come into Destination Crenshaw, having a resident actually tell you about what you're looking at, to me is what I imagine and envision in my mind about the optimal Destination Crenshaw experience. Right? Because it is a destination for the community and we want to uphold it. We want to make sure that we have definitely the funding for it to be able to operate it as it should be. But we ultimately want the community ownership, that they all are involved in maintaining it in their way, in their mind.
Great. So we talked a lot about this project, the uniqueness of it, some of the innovative approaches from design to funding to leadership and engagement. What would be each of yours recommendation to other infrastructure projects across this nation that impact urban communities and specifically communities of color, vis-a-vis the expansion of trains or some other public development? Anybody can go first. I'll let y'all scramble it out.
Well,
Make sure there's art. That's all I gotta say. 5
art. Yes. I would.
visual landscape of your community and what it means and how children interact when they're walking to school. There's so much that happens in a neighborhood, and I think people sometimes you get bogged down in the details of what the train or the infrastructure is going to do, but what else is happening? What about the parks? What about green space? What about what's visually happening in that neighborhood that needs to be elevated and embraced, and to be able to make this a livable, enjoyable, and a great space? That's put your stake in the ground. No.
So I would add, think about how your project can actually repair the relationship between community members and their political representation. Think about how your project can actually invigorate conversations between community members and their representation, right? Like, how is this project a way for you to facilitate a conversation that's not just about your project, that's about a greater good, a common space, a community, a city that is shared? Because ultimately, communities of colors, we have an orientation to change that needs to change. And in order to do that, we have to be forward, and we have to be allowed to be forward, right? Like, these equitable processes need to not just have seats at the table, but we need to have reallocation of resources to communities that are disinvested so that they can actually participate in life as we know we deserve. So I think that public infrastructure is a way, and I like to say it is at the highest level of privilege, where you're dictating how people live and move within their spaces. So it is your responsibility and an accountability to the people in the community to uphold that standard and to allow people to participate in that level, and not just have meetings with sticky notes and things like that. Because I've been that community advocate and been in that meeting and felt like I was not heard. And I can speak to the people a part of Destination Crenshaw and know that they're heard, because they can point to things that they've said that are now in the project. And that right there is the tangible difference between community design and checking the box.
There you go. Kenneth?
It's hard to follow that, but I think if you had asked anyone 10 years ago, hey, what do you think we should do with Crenshaw to really revitalize, really strengthen this? I doubt very few people would have said, you know what, let's put a rail line right down the center of Crenshaw Boulevard.
Exactly.
But, the relationship between major transportation infrastructure and other civic projects and communities of color has not always been a positive story in this country. In fact, it's mostly been a negative story. But to the credit of the leadership there in Los Angeles and this project and the community and the metro, everyone pulled together and as Councilman Dawson said, turn lemons into lemonade. And I think part of the ability to do that is to look at that particular relationship in that community with its with the city and transportation over time. Never assume that that relationship is the same in every city or in every neighborhood, but take the time to find out what is that relationship unique to that community, so that then you can build on that and you can acknowledge what was negative, but also inspire what is positive and what is possible, and to find that nugget of an authentic story, because every community is unique. Every community of color is unique. Find that nugget of authenticity and build on that in collaboration with the city, and you can accomplish some amazing things.
And can I add one more thing, Gabrielle?
Of course, you're the client. You can do whatever you want.
One thing I would say, another recommendation is do not anticipate a fight. Communities of color actually want their communities to be great.
Yeah.
Right? I think that is a misnomer that we're working really hard to really dispel, right? And we want people to really go into these with an open mind. That means no rendering, right? Because that's what you actually get the reaction from, is that you already have the project mapped out and you're asking people their opinions about it. So if you go into it with literally a clean slate around like a problem that you're trying to solve, you will have these artists come in and design something that you could not have imagined, like Kenneth said. And I think that it is that way of assuming the best out of our community residents, assuming the best out of the people that share our spaces, that allows us to really reach our greatest heights as a community.
Great. Joy, did you chime in on that? I can't remember.
First.
Okay, good. I'm gonna chime in a little bit here because we're not quite done with time. But what I would recommend for those designers, urban designers, architects, those stewards of the built environment, that lead with questions. Do not lead with assumptions. We should not be coming into any community with a pre-baked notion of what the problem is and here's some solutions. We're just going to run it by you. I think the value and the long-term success of this project and this process is going to be that it's going to perhaps ward off gentrification. It's going to increase and value the buy-in and the ownership of the community, which leads to longevity and success. So to everybody out there, be curious, very curious. That is the last of our questions. I didn't want to leave with anything negative, but what keeps you all up at night relative to this project? It's not necessarily negative, but
just getting it done on time. No.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it time.
Lots of moving parts and lots of people that have to connect for this thing to come together. But it's exciting and it's thrilling. Yes, it keeps you up at night, but not in a bad way. It just, you may have to have an extra glass of wine, but you still get through it because you're excited and you're really excited about the possibility and what it means in the end. I mean, that's for me.
I think for me, what keeps me up at night is like what we're not doing. So Destination Crenshaw is not all things, right? And I talked about our 2 pandemics that we were in. And I really think that we are doing our due diligence and our part in the overall movement for, more healthier spaces for Black people in this country. But what keeps me up at night is the fact that Black people will still be in this country fighting for their freedom and the ability to move within spaces. And we don't have Destination Crenshaws everywhere. So what keeps me up at night is that, we have to create projects like this. They can have their own name. We're not going to make them be destination, whatever city. But, I really do want them to think of us as a model to how we can really invite Black community and brown community into these projects so that they are seen as the change happens, so that we can, build a better society.
Great. Kenneth?
And, this project has been at the very top of the exciting projects of my career. And the thing that I guess juices me up, I'm not sure if it keeps me up all night, but pre-COVID, I traveled in cities all over North America, Canada and the US on business all the time. And now I cannot travel anywhere where I don't look at it through the lens of what they're doing right there in South Central LA, because I see possibilities and opportunities in communities everywhere. And it's really inspiring. And I have to say, this has just been a real blessing to be an architect working with this community, and it will forever make me a better designer.
I couldn't agree more. What keeps me up at night is managing all the balls, all the different pieces, and making sure, like who said it, makes what did we forget or what did we not do? So I think the value of this team, this is just a part of our very large team, is the level of collaboration, congeniality, whatever, that we're really all moving towards the success of this project. I want to thank you all, as you are the team of a lifetime. I hope our audience has gotten something out of this. For those of you who are interested in more about Destination Crenshaw, you can go to the very robust destinationcrenshaw.la for more information on team, project, everything else. So I thank you all and have a good day. Thank you, Joy, Jason, and